All right, we're live, Mr. Jose Luis Morales. How you doing, brother?
Doing wonderful, Mr. Aaron Novello.
Yeah, and we got a hard stop because you still got a day job, right?
I know. I still got to go out and sell real estate during the day.
You still got to go do some stuff, man, which is great. You have a live event that you're gracious enough to host locally in your marketplace in Oxnard. And you're going to be going over today how to have conversations with sellers about price in preparation for meeting in person. So during the pre-qual, is that right?
Yeah. So the problem that I see a lot of times is that agents walk into presentations either to make a cash offer or a listing presentation without knowing the price that they want. And trying to price a property and do the homework, not in a typical tract neighborhood, but let's say like a place where homes are very different. It's basically a recipe for disaster, and it's a recipe for you not getting the business. What I also find is that the agents that do ask the seller what they want is a lot of times they get pushback. And the seller's like, well, I want to hear what you have to say about price first, or, hey, I don't feel comfortable sharing that with you. Or they'll say something along the lines like, I'm really not sure, or I'm not aware. And agents won't know what direction to take it in. I believe that if you're able to somewhat have an idea of what the seller wants in terms of price, it'll actually help you determine what the right solution for them is, along with the other pieces of the puzzle.
Now, in order to understand what you're saying and for people to have this make sense to them, is we've been advocating and equipping agents across the country with the mental map that the agent of the future will not just be somebody who can provide one option, which is retail, but can also provide other options, which could be creative as far as maybe a cash offer. Maybe we could do a novation. Maybe we can do a sub-2 deal. So in either realm, though, if you're getting pushback when you're asking a seller directly, you know, what it is that they're interested in or what it is that they were thinking or what their expectation is around price, it'll serve you in either whether it's retail or it's creative, correct?
Well, what I tell people is that a lot of people like they start getting into the investor world as an agent, and they're like, oh my God, like what do I do or what do I say? And it's actually the same exact thing as a listing. It's just phrased a little bit different. So what we've realized here at Elite Builders is that, like,
were you just throwing up an Elite Builder sign? Is that what you're doing? I was like, dang, all right.
No, what we realize here is that regardless if it's a cash or a listing, you want to know roughly what price they want, because at that point, it'll help you prepare like, okay, what direction am I going to take this in? Am I going to propose a listing? Am I going to propose an open door offer? Am I going to propose an offer with one of my investors? Or is this a good enough deal that I can take it on myself and still make some money on it? So it allows you to kind of like determine that. So here's my question to everybody. One, how many of you guys are asking the seller for the price that they want before you go on the appointment? Two, if you're getting pushback on the price, how are you handling that? Meaning if a seller says, well, I don't feel comfortable sharing that with you, or I don't know, or we want to hear what you have to say first, or hey, look, I'm actually not sharing that with anybody. I'm getting different opinions. How are you handling that moment when that happens? So I guess that's my question to you, Aaron. So how would you ask for price? And then once you get the pushback, if you get the pushback, how would you handle that as well too?
Yeah, so that has evolved over time. And what I noticed is the original way that I was kind of guided to have the conversation around price was one that was very combative and would lead with authority first. Right. So like I study these things all the time, right? What price won't you go below, sort of thing. And the logic behind that, like I always like to ask people questions. Like if I came up to you, Jose, and I was like, hey, let's say you were selling your watch. And I'm like, all right, what's the lowest price you'd go? Like immediately, what is your internal response going to be?
Well, it's funny because try it out on somebody and you're going to see that immediately they'll cross their arms, or they'll be like, or they'll throw a high number or something like that.
Yeah, because initially, right away, when I approach you in that way, whatever it is that you're selling, a car, a watch, or a house, and I say, hey, what price won't you go below? What what goes on for you internally and mentally when you hear that? What is the assumption that you have of the other person?
And this is really interesting because from an investor standpoint, it's a little bit different than an agent. But from an agent standpoint, I start to think, is this person trying to like lowball my property? Is this person not want to get me as much equity as I possibly can on the home? Is this person going to look out for my best interest? So it starts to associate negative things with the question that you're asking as it relates to them hiring you for the job of selling their property, basically.
That's right. That's precisely right. And what I've learned is when left to people's own devices, they usually think the worst possible outcome or something that's negative. So initially they're like, hey, well, Jose just wants me to price it really low so we can make a commission really fast.
Really fast.
So that evolved over time because I would utilize that language pattern in the wild, in the jungle, and receive a lot of pushback and a lot of friction, right? And instead, I began to alter it and say, like, I'm going to be providing you that market analysis really in an attempt to make a very educated guess with regards to how we need to position a property price-wise. You strike me, Jose, to be someone who's pretty savvy. I'm sure you've gone online and looked some of these sites that give estimates of value. So did you have an idea at all of realistically what you were thinking in terms of price? Quiet. So in doing so, I've set a different frame.
Yeah.
And you're more receptive to that information. I know that you're looking at it all the time because the vast majority of Americans have almost all of their net worth tied up into their home. So you've been reviewing it. You do go to these sites. And when you say that, they're either going to say something reasonable, unreasonable, or they'll say that's none of your business, right? So if they say something reasonable, something that's like, in the ballpark, it's like, okay, great. And, and then I would let them know, hey, my intention in asking you that, it's really not to kind of create any urgency or to like negotiate with you. Like, we're on the same team. I want to help you to maximize value and get as much as you possibly can. Sometimes what homeowners, their expectations are and what's actually true in the marketplace, what buyers and sellers have been agreeing to, is a little different. So it's really just to gauge your expectation. And it seems like, based on what you're seeing online, it's in alignment with your expectation and what you were initially thinking. And I'm curious, and then I'd go on to the next question, right? So there's different ways that you can ask it that are more palatable and won't cause people to initially become incredibly defensive.
Yeah. What it makes me think of, if they say something unreasonable in both the listing and cash offer, you could follow up with an additional question like, hey, Jose, I'm very respectful of that. Let me ask you this. Like, if you knew that right about 800,000, like, let's say they say something unreasonable, like a million two, and you're like, and the area, you've already done some comps in advance. You're like, hey, if you knew that you could only get about 800,000, would you still consider selling the property? And
that's right.
Shut up. That's what I think about when they say something unreasonable. If they say something reasonable, it's like, fantastic, great. Like, that's what you were hoping for. And obviously that allows you to do your comps better. And now it increases the probability of you wanting to go on that appointment. If they say something unreasonable, like something really high, that may require that you address it on that call. Or if you don't know if it's like, it's funny, I'm going on an appointment today and the lady goes, yeah, I like 900,000 cash. And immediately in my head, I'm like, wow, that's way too high. That's what I thought in my head, but I wasn't 100% sure. So I said, okay, no problem. I'll do the research and I'll basically bring that with me. I did the comps, bro, and I think she's pretty spot on. Yeah, I think she's pretty spot on. So it's like, instead of me saying that there, I held back. I did the research after I did and if the research still came back that let's say the value was 700,000, I may jump on another call with her and be like, hey, look, I did some of the research. My goal is to be upfront, transparent with you. Obviously, I would never want to waste your time. Let me ask you this: if you knew that you could only get 700,000 for the property, is that something that you'd still be prepared to sell, or at that point would it not make sense for you?
Yeah, and then quiet.
Exactly.
And in doing so, you're actually saving a tremendous amount of time. What I wrote down here is like when they would say something like unreasonable, and it takes like professional and emotional restraint, because even though initially you were like, man, that's way too high, but you're like, all right, well, great. I'll do that market analysis, to really try to determine where the marketplace is showing us is reasonable. And, in preparation for connecting, I'll share that with you. I'll bring it with me so we can review it together as a team. And then you just moved on thinking to yourself, okay, I'm going to do the homework first. And then if for some reason the homework confirms my initial bias, which was like, hey, way too high, then I'm going to call back and actually do a second pre-qual, which is like, hey, my intention is to really provide as much value as we possibly can. It's get you every penny possible. I also take the responsibility you provided me with very seriously, which is to earn your business with integrity, tell you about what's reasonable and what you could expect to receive. And I wouldn't want to waste any of your time. And in doing this homework, I was really doing my best to really try to justify that $900,000 number. And I found a couple pieces of information that I'd just like to share with you that you may or may not be aware of. Would that be okay? And they're like, yeah, that's fine. Well, it looks like there were 3 transactions in the last 90 days in your community. And there's actually one on your street. It's about 4 streets over. Were you aware of that transaction on 1265 Plum? And they're like, oh yeah, that was like the Smiths. It's like, yeah. Were you ever inside of their home? No. And they're like, no, I wasn't. Okay. Well, I'm looking here at the pictures and I'd be more than happy to share this information with you. I know you shared with me, you remodeled. It looks like they remodeled as well, kitchen, bathrooms, and flooring. They also had a pool. Now, refresh my memory. Did you have a pool?
No.
Okay. And I think I don't need to tell you that an appraiser will give value for a pool. And in this price point, probably around 30 to 40 in terms of resale value. Do you know what they actually sold for just 28 days ago?
No.
$735,000. So I guess my question to you would be, and again, this isn't a great urgency. It's just to gauge where you're at and what you value most and what's important to you. If you knew that through no fault of your own, that's the only thing I would add there, right? Because they want to place fault somewhere. Through no fault of your own or mine, just based on what buyers and sellers have been agreeing to, the marketplace has shown us somewhere around that 700 number is reasonable. Do you think you would still consider selling based on what your goals and objectives are, or would you just stay put? So procedurally, what I'm watching you do, and I want to frame for everybody who's going to watch this, is you're asking questions around price, which really, what are we really asking around price? Like, yes, we want to gauge what their expectations are, and that's very important in terms of that puzzle that we're putting together. But also underneath price is motivation, yeah?
Yeah. 100%.
Because motivation fixes price. So what I wrote down here is if she says something really unreasonable and you kind of say, okay, well, my job's to help you. It's never to talk you into doing anything. And we'll do that homework together as a team to determine where the marketplace is showing us is reasonable. And then tell me this, because my job's to help you. It's never to, twist your arm to sell this property. Is it an option for you to maybe not sell and, make the best of it? Is it an option for you to rent the home and still accomplish what you want, right? Is it an option to keep it as a secondary home when you make the move? Do you have funds outside of the sale of this property in order to facilitate, what you want to do? And all of those questions now help me to determine like that prospecting IQ. Even though she told me a number that was unreasonable, if all of those motivations are like 10s, what people say they're going to do and what they actually do are different things. Yeah. That's great.
I think it leads to the connection as well, too, as to motivation and price are connected and motivation fixes price. Here's what I also find, Aaron, and this is, I think, the biggest challenge. And when I got into the business, I didn't know how to explain this. But what I realized is that most agents only have one way of asking the same question.
Yes.
And as soon as they get pushback, that's the only way. And that's the reason I'm going so deep on some of these topics like price. So what I came up was different ways of asking the pricing question. So for example, like one way is the way that you described it. Another way is, hey, when I see you, how much would you want to list the home for? Just very, very, very simple. Another way would be like on an expired would be like, hey, I know that you had it listed for Y about 2 months ago. Realistically speaking, how much did you want to list it for this time around? It's a different way of asking for the price. So what I believe that the agent of the future for the pricing portion of the presentation or the pre-qual has different ways of getting the same thing. Here's some different ways. Like if somebody says, like sometimes people tell me, well, I don't know what my house is worth. And then I'll ask it a different, I'll be like, well, I know you don't know the value. What were you hoping to get for the property? Which is just basically a different way. Well,
of asking
like you don't know what the value is, but you're hoping to get a certain number,
Yeah.
And they'll be like, well, I was hoping to get like 900. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, great. Now
It's
I
kind of
know.
like on coaching calls when people are like, I'll ask them a direct question and they'll be like, I don't know. I'm like, it's okay. If you did know, what would it be?
Yeah.
And then like, bam, they come up with something, you know what I'm saying? And what I wrote down here is when the pushback is interesting. And we talked about this the other night, where we were like, yeah, dude, you're like, yeah, what I noticed is for yourself, but also for agents, where a lot of it falls apart is the moment that they get any pushback. So pushback on price, pushback on commission, pushback on terms, pushback on an interview with other agents, and how they handle that. And I think there's two components. There's an emotional component, and then there's also like a practical component. And what I wrote down here is like, let's say somebody says to you, it's none of your business, Jose. Most people like, they freak out like I offended them or like they're mad. So I'm like, hey, did you have like you strike me to be someone who's pretty savvy. I'm sure you've gone online, see some of these sites that give estimates of value. Did you have an idea at all of realistically what you were thinking in terms of price? And that language pattern is specific because everything after the word realistically has to be realistic. It's neurolinguistic programming. And let's say they're like, that's none of your business. Or I want you to tell me first. Because what are they perceiving? They're perceiving this as a negotiation.
Yeah. They're perceiving that if they tell you the number first,
it's going to affect.
That it's going to affect whatever you
Yes.
tell them that the value is.
So that in there lies the answer. The obstacle becomes the way. So, hey, Jose, just so you know, my intention in asking, it's really not going to affect what the marketplace shows us, based on comparables. Buyers and sellers have been agreeing for properties that are like yours. Instead, it's really just to gauge expectation. Sometimes I'm not suggesting this is true for you. A homeowner's expectation and what the marketplace is willing to bear are two different things. So I'm on here on one of these sites and they're giving an estimate of around 850. Is that in alignment with what you were thinking? And then be quiet. Now look what we just did very skillfully. I asked them, I set the frame because they're thinking, right, one thing, and I'm framing it completely different, right? Then I'm giving them data, which is going to cause them to either say, yes, that is about what we were thinking, or that's way too low, or maybe that's a little high. But that gives me data that now I can work with as I'm starting to put together this kind of puzzle.
And even then, and for me, when I learned the whole gauging expectation line, that was like, oh my God, that saved me so many times because I was like, and what you're saying is true. Like, okay, whenever you're getting an objection, like none of your business, you have to be like, okay, what's triggering this to coming up?
Yeah,
and
what's underneath?
What's underneath it? And the reason is that they believe that if they share that number with you, it's going to affect them in some way or another. So a lot of times, if you know that that's the belief, helping clarify that will actually get them to open up. So I say the same thing very similarly, and I'll be like, well, look, just so you know, the reason I'm asking this is more or less to gauge expectation. I want to make sure that your expectation and obviously the market's expectations or our expectations are somewhat in line. I'll be very transparent with you, Aaron. I went on an appointment like a couple years back, and the person was like, look, I don't want to share with you the price. I go on the appointment and it turns out that he wants like $3 million more than like whatever the property is worth. To be fully transparent and pretty direct, I could have let him know over the phone that, look, the market value is not in that price range. And it would have saved them a lot of time. And it also would have saved us a lot of time. My goal is to be fully transparent with you and fully very direct, very straightforward. We actually expect the same thing from our clients. I'm not asking for an exact number. Could you at least give me a range of what you're thinking?
Yeah, that's right. So look at what we're both doing. They share with us, right? There's pushback. We're giving them a frame, of how to receive the information, because if we don't give people a frame, they fill it in themselves. Yeah. So our minds are constantly trying to make sense of reality. It's being bombarded with like kind of data all the time. And narrative is a construct of reality. It's how we create reality, is through story. And our minds detest when there's gaps, and it fills them in based on our own experience or based on what somebody else told us or what we've read or whatever. So if we don't give people a frame, they fill it in themselves. So when I asked that question, so let's say we asked it in the kind of previous iteration, which is like, no frame, I study homes and prices, like I know you don't, I'm smart, you're silly, what price won't you go below? I'm not giving them a frame and
No.
explaining to them how to receive the information. So they're automatically going to deduce that you're just trying to negotiate with me and try to get me at a low price so you could just get a commission.
Well, not only that, but what I would find myself is that I'd have a really good setting the appointment conversation, and then I would get to the prequal, and by presenting in that manner, I would almost like they'd a decent amount of times I was getting the appointments canceled in that question specifically because it would relate to friction, or it would put me at a disadvantage because it would leave them with a negative taste in their mouth by me going to the appointment. So, but even here, like, so one of the things that I like is like, look, I'm not looking for an exact number. Could you at least give me a range? Another one is like, hey, what were you hoping that that the value is?
Yeah.
Hey, like, what do you think the value of the home is? You know, that's another one. If somebody made you an offer and they offered you 850 in cash, like, would that be insulting to you?
Yeah. Would you consider it? Like if you knew that through no fault of your own or mine, that, you know, based on what buyers and sellers have been agreeing to, that realistically, you know, you'd probably expect to receive like 750-ish for the property. Do you think you'd still consider selling, or would you just stay put?
Even something like this, Aaron. Hey, Aaron, has the property ever been appraised?
Mm-hmm.
How long ago was it appraised? Oh, like a year ago. And if you don't mind me asking, what did that appraisal come in at?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it came in at 800. Okay, and
now, and here's the perfect. And here, let's say they push back. Why is that important, Jose? Now we go into, you ready? Hey, just so you know, my intention in asking, it's not to be nosy, and it certainly won't affect what the marketplace and what the CMA shows us in terms of what we could expect to receive on the open market. My intention instead is really just to gauge expectation, because sometimes homeowners' expectations aren't in alignment with current market conditions. So just so I'm clear, being that appraised about a year ago, you know, for like 850, what were you thinking of putting the home on the market now, realistically? Quiet.
Yeah. Because that doesn't mean just because it appraised at that price that's what they want to list it for, you know?
No.
Or you could even ask them like, hey, I know it appraised at 850 last year. What are your thoughts on that number? Or I know that you had offers when you were previously listed at, you mentioned to me that at 850. What are your thoughts on that number today?
Yeah.
Oh, like,
you know how I would, yeah, what I would ask that, and I was like, okay, so, and let's say, and I appreciate your willingness to share. The more you're willing to share, the better equipped I am to provide guidance or information that could be helpful or useful. That's a frame.
Yeah.
In your best interest that we have this conversation. And it's like, yeah, I know you shared with me you had an offer, and you know, it just didn't work out, and at the time wasn't acceptable to you, that 850 number. I'm curious, if we had an offer that was similar at 850 today, do you think you'd consider it? And sometimes people are like, yeah, I should have took it.
Yeah, they will. And now you're like, oh my God, that makes your job so much easier.
Yeah.
But it's this ability. And if the audience is watching, the ability to be able to ask for pricing in different ways, in different situations, is the next level. When I see you, how much do you want to list your home for? Very basic. What price won't you go below? That's very basic right there. That's
like elementary school.
Elementary, yeah. So now here's the other thing I was going to say, like even in different situations like probates. Hey, has there been a court-appointed appraiser at the property yet? What did that appraisal come back at? You know? Mm-hmm. And here's one, and it's funny because I'm going to be telling a story of how I bought my house. And how I bought my house was really interesting. I got a lead from a friend that I know, and he told me, hey, look, the person's looking to sell, and they're looking to sell at X price. And when he told me the price, it was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So I went and knocked the lady, and I was like, hey, are you interested in selling? She said, come back tomorrow. And I go back and I'm like, hey, look, like I didn't offer. Usually what I recommend is asking first and then making an offer. So I asked her, I said, what would you like to sell the home for? And she goes, I'm not going to tell you. I want you to make me an offer without telling me. And I'm like, man, I ask it a different way. I'm like, hey, if you can get a certain price, what would it be? She's like, I'm not going to tell you once again, Jose. So then I throw out the number that my friend had told me. I'm like, hey, if somebody made you an offer at X price, how would you react? And she goes, no, that's way too low. So I'm like, oh shit, my friend was wrong on the price, on the price that she told me. So then I don't give up on it. I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep going. So then I'm like, just out of curiosity, what price are you going to buy out in Missouri. And she goes, well, I'm going to buy something about 200. I'm like, okay. And how much do you owe on this property? And she goes, well, I owe 200. And I'm like, okay. And what were you planning on doing with the rest of the money? She's like, well, I was hoping to get an additional 400,000 out of it to basically put in the stock market for mom to provide some sort of dividend. So I started doing the math. I'm like, she owes 200. The house is going to cost her 200. She's hoping to put 400. Like that's already 800. I'm like, there's no way she was going to consider the number my friend had told me was 500. I'm like, completely off. So then I basically call this strategy reverse engineering it. Like if you can find out what are the other things that they want to do with the proceeds, you'll have a pretty good idea as to what they want. And then I was like, so you're probably thinking somewhere around 800,000. And she smiles and she goes, that's what I'm hoping to get for it.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's all I wanted to know,
And now I can make a decision if I want to do it or not.
Yeah. So I ended up offering 750 and we ended up negotiating at 775 and I was good with that. Yeah. But that skill right there, look, my family and I are so happy in this home. It's crazy, bro, how happy we are at this home. And my ability to be able to ask the pricing questions before making the offer actually allowed me to get this property at a very fair price. And it allowed us to be able to remodel it the way that we wanted to, basically, because we were able to get it at a great price. Yeah. But if I didn't learn that skill, I wouldn't be sitting in this house today.
No, and I would propose if you didn't learn that skill, not only would you not be sitting in the house, you wouldn't own all the real estate that you own. You wouldn't like none of that, dude. Like that's been the specialized knowledge and the foundation of your success.
And I'll tell you this, like usually when I role play with people and they'll be like, well, how much do you want to list the home for? I'm like, well, I was hoping that you would tell me. What I typically hear is like, they start like hesitating because they have no idea, one, how to ask the question in a different way. And then two, they have no idea why that is even coming up or what it means. So they can't clarify why they're asking that question. Hence, they're walking into presentations without knowing the price and they're getting beat out by other agents.
That's right. And then what it becomes is instead of what do you have, what do you need? And then me presenting to you a solution, it becomes a popularity contest.
Yeah.
And then you try to sell them on like some lame stuff like, I got buyers from Venezuela, which is like, no, you don't. We all use the same photographers. We all use the same, you know what I mean? Like, no. So this is really about discovering problems, solving them. I wrote down here based on like what you were saying, which I think is very true. I think entry level to the game of selling is learning what to say and how to say it. Like just from a
very basic
scripting perspective. It's very basic. And we had somebody on one of the calls. He was like, yeah, dude, like I'm as good as Jose. And I was like, and I called him out, and to his credit, he took it as instruction. But it's like, nah, dude, like, yeah, you may know the script, but like being able to ask additional questions, being able to push back politely, what I call polite confrontation, right? So when somebody's it's key, bro. So what I wrote down here is like dealing with pushback and learning how to politely confront people and keep going in the face of pushback is the pro level. It's the difference between taking 20 listings a year and taking 60.
Yeah.
So, and this extends to all different areas. So not only is it about price, but let's say somebody says, yeah, Jose, we really appreciated your presentation. Appreciate you coming out. We like your little dimples, but we're going to interview another agent and then we'll make a decision. I mean, that's pushback. So how do you deal with that? Do you just like, okay, see you later? Bro, I hopped in the rope because we have this role play group, which is fantastic now. Everybody should go to school, Aaron Novello School, and we provide you with a role play group, and it's free. That's how much we're just trying to add value to you guys. We used to charge for it. Now we made it free for you. And every once in a while, I might jump in. Jose might jump in. So you got to stay on your toes. So I jumped in, right? And I got Gladish. And we were role playing price reductions. And I was like, well, tell me a little bit of, always like you now, because I need to know the pieces of the puzzle before we just jump into it.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, what's the motivation? Why are they trying to sell? What's the dynamic? What communication? Yeah. How many showings have you had? Timing? What communication have you had up until now? And he shared with me that actually, as we were role playing, he told me all those things, but as we were role playing, he gets to the pricing part. He's like, yeah, we've been on the market this amount of time. And like, like we have a couple options and, I'm here to serve you. So if you just want to wait, like, that's okay. So what do you want to do? I was like, what are you doing? Like, he's like, oh, I'm just being like my amiable side. I'm like, well, tell me what happened. He's like, well, I asked her for a larger reduction and she came back $5,000 below. And I said, okay, this is this. It's politely pushing back. And
about 5,000 below,
something like that. It was like a small reduction that was, he asked for like 650 and she ended up getting like 695. Like, it was like, it's not where he needs to be. So like 10% too high still, you know?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because there was pushback and he didn't know what to do. So instead of, when she's like, yeah, can we do 695? Of course we can, Jose. You know, you're the boss. My job's to help you. It's never to talk you into doing anything. Can I share with you what would concern me for you and your family and how much you end up netting if you chose that approach? So look, I'm politely pushing back. Polite confrontation. And you know, Jose is very well trained because he's finishing my sentences. That's exactly what he's going to say to them. He's going to politely push back. And then I have to set the frame, right? And then I give them the options and the choices. And I would even go so far as to say, is like, look, you're the boss here, right? My job's to help you. It's never talking you to do anything. I'd much rather see you make an adjustment that the marketplace is showing us is required that we make versus making a small one because perhaps it's a little bit more palatable. And then we have to revisit this conversation down the road. And it could end up affecting how much we end up getting for you and your family. Because truthfully, Jose, if we were just missing by $10,000, we'd probably have an offer on the table already. Does that make sense to you? I'm politely pushing back, right? And then providing the options and then, you know, therefore helping them to make the decision, which is to make a stronger adjustment, which actually is going to serve them better in the long run.
Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting because when you made me aware that all of these things are individual skills, like, so before you came into my life, I had never practiced a price reduction skill or a price reduction. And what you mentioned to me at that time, you told me, look, in order to be a dominant listing agent, this is going to be one of the skills that you have to master, which is how to get price reductions. And I remember you walking me through the system of how to get price reductions on properties. And once I learned that, and not only that, but I started thinking about price reductions as percentages versus like dollar amounts, like meaning if you're reducing $10,000 on a $100,000 mobile home, that's a good amount. If you're reducing $10,000 on $1 million property, that is nothing. It's basically like 1%. So
yeah, you might as well not even do it. Like, it doesn't even make sense.
All that was helpful. But so what we're committed here at Elite Builders is we're committed to each of these different skills. And what I'm doing is I'm going to put everything in a flow chart, and then Aaron and I are going to break down each one of those individual topics. So like right now, we're breaking down the pricing portion of the prequal. Next week, what I was thinking, because I've already done the CMA, I'm doing the prequal one. I'm thinking next one doing the price reduction, because I think a lot of people are struggling with this one right now with inventory increasing, and it's leading to internal conflicts with a lot of agents. Agreed. So I think being able to break down the price reduction for different people and having a document that they can practice it, I think that alone is going to be extremely helpful for them.
Yeah, and then they can take this practical, tactical information, join the role play group, and then apply what it is that they're learning. Because that's where the magic happens, is when you have data and information, and then you have a community with which you can go into, to plug into, to practice and hone and refine that skill. So then you actually own the information, right? It's not like external, it becomes internal. And I remember specifically, Jose, like for you, because you have an amiable streak, you're a good dude, and you really care about your clients, and you want to make sure you're doing a great job. And I remember like the price adjustment thing for you was like internally difficult. You were taking so much personal responsibility for the price, and it would cause you a lot of internal kind of struggle and consternation and kind of strife where you wasn't comfortable with you making those calls. And when you did, it was like difficult kind of drudgery to push through.
Well, part of it too is not knowing what to say and not knowing how to handle it as well too, because what people imagine sometimes is that you're just going to ask people for a price reduction and they're going to be like, okay, sure. Like, why didn't I think about reducing the price on my home $100,000? Sure, why not, Jose? That's what a lot of people imagine until they're like, no, like, what are you doing to market my home? Like,
hey, meanwhile, most people will shop for like 3 hours to save $100 on like Amazon, and you expect someone to be like, well, Jose, you're a nice guy. Let's lower the price $100,000. You've been trying really hard. Like, no, that is a skill-based conversation. And something that you said too I used to imagine at the beginning, in terms of like evolution of skill sets, the two skill sets that I focused on the most, obviously, was setting appointments and listing appointments, like the listing presentation. And what I became increasingly aware of is that I read a book, I think it was called like Everything is a Presentation. I forgot who the author is. And that just caused me to become like aware. It gave me a frame with which to think about what I was doing. That every single conversation that we have is a presentation. So the setting the appointment is a presentation. The pre-qual is a presentation. The actual listing presentation is a presentation. Handling objections is a presentation. Closing is a presentation. Right? And price reductions are a presentation. Negotiating offers are a presentation. So these are all separate presentations that we need to master.
And that's what's missing in our industry, bro.
And that's what's missing in the industry.
That's what's missing in the industry right now. Even how to do comps, bro.
Yeah.
Like how to do like I have won sales because of the way that I've done comps, and the other agents weren't looking at it from that perspective. So that is a skill as well too. So all of these things are different skills that you as agent, in order to become a dominant agent, you're going to have to learn these individual skills and how to think about these skills the right way.
Right. So the question I would be asking, everybody who's watching is, do you have a plan? Like if you look over the last 6 to 12 months, have you been intentionally and purposefully and consciously, with energy, effort, and resources and structure, going about mastering these conversations that we just talked about, all of these different presentations, right? Because what I would imagine is you're probably spending most of your time learning how to master setting appointments and perhaps maybe the listing presentation.
And that's it.
And that's it. With a super high degree of probability, all of these other conversations, you just wing it.
Even like when there's tenant occupied properties, that is a presentation right there with the seller and with the tenant as well too.
That's right.
Like with the tenant, setting the right expectations with the tenant. So, and it's funny because I found myself like having these conversations and then setting up a formula as to like, okay, what's the best way to have these different conversations with people? But a lot of people don't have those individual skills. Now, if we focus back on how to ask for pricing, we've talked about how to ask it from a listing agent perspective, but what about a cash perspective?
Yeah, it's good.
It's the same thing. You're asking for the same thing. So the way I usually ask it, I'll be like, look, Aaron, this is the way that we work. I'm very transparent. I'm very straight to the point. Obviously, I would never want to waste your time in any way, shape, or form. With that being said, is there a certain price that you're looking for to try to see if we can accommodate as investors and try to make it work for you?
That's right. And what we've deduced from real-time direct experience, right? Knowing, I was actually in the Bible, like I was doing Bible study this morning, and I came across the word to know, and I looked it up in Greek and in Hebrew. And it's so interesting because to know is to have like an intimate relationship with, or to have direct experience with. So we have deduced from having direct experience that when you ask that question to somebody who is indeed interested, their primary motivation is the cash offer. More often than not always, but with a very high degree of probability, they will tell you the number that they want, correct?
Correct.
Yep. And that's how you know, as you're going down that path, if they say a number out loud, yeah, Jose, I want 500. Okay, cool. Now you know that more likely than not, they are actually interested in a cash offer, and that is their preference.
Yeah. Well, it's very hard to talk somebody down from, if they want $1.2 million, to talk them down to 600,000 on their property. It's like, and a lot of times I think what people have to realize, when somebody has a price, the price that they want is connected to different goals.
Correct.
So like, because it's connected to different goals, it's very difficult for people to come off that price.
It's either connected to goals or a need. It's like, so to the point when your boy told you 500 and you threw it at her, it's just like, no way. Well, he didn't know that she actually needed 200,000 for the purchase, and what she wanted, and she owed 200, and that she wanted an additional 4, right? So it's attached to needs and perhaps some wants.
And what would have happened in that case, had I been like, no, I'll only give you 500, she was already talking to a realtor, but the realtor was saying right around 850, somewhere in that range. So she was willing to leave a little bit of money on the table for the security of having a cash buyer ready to go, basically.
That's right.
But it was because it was very close to that, not 300,000 off, you know?
Yes, correct. And you knew that, because like it was so close, because if she did hire that agent and paid them a commission, it's
so
about
close.
what you were gonna, like, you know, plus or minus 10 or 15,000 bucks. And you knew that even by paying a little bit more than what maybe you were initially thinking, you knew in the long run it would be a good deal for your family. So you're like, yeah, okay, I'll leave a little bit of money on the table.
Yeah. I tell anybody in the neighborhood what I paid for it. They're just like, oh my God, like that's unbelievable. And I'm like, yeah, like I invested a lot of money.
You're like, yeah, don't ask me how much I put into it though.
Yeah, don't ask me. Because a lot of people assume they're like, you probably have a bunch of equity. I mean, now with everything that we put into it, we're probably like at a break even or even at a negative. But
yeah,
dude, it's worth it.
Yeah. You got a nice little compound. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
I'll be spending a little bit more time out there in Oxnard.
I know.
Once the Aaron wing is complete, you know.
I know the Aaron division to it.
Yeah.
But even like for asking, so these are a couple different ways of asking for a cash offer. So assuming that this was an as-is sale, no closing costs, no commission, what would be the best price that you'd be willing to give me, basically?
Bam.
If we paid for all the closing costs, bought the home in as-is condition, there were no commissions, and can close on your timeline, what is the absolute price you would do? And then sometimes just even asking them, be like, they'll give you a number and be like, is that the best price? And they might say, like, I asked this lady, she's like 750. I'm like, is that, I'm like, what would be the absolute best price? She goes 700.
Just by asking one question, bro.
And at 700, I was like, man, this is a great property. And we're actually closing on it.
I love it. And what I'm aware of is that the skill is the same. So in other words, like they cross over. And what came to, and I'll share how they cross over. So like, let's say they say to you, well, like, I want you to tell me. Well, it's the same skill. Well, you know, just so you know, my intention in asking is really just to gauge your expectation. Your time's really, really valuable. I certainly wouldn't want to waste any of it. And I can see here that, you know, we have a good fortune of helping a lot of families in a similar dynamic. So if you knew that through no fault of your own or mine, that, you know, what an investor like myself would be willing to pay is somewhere around X, do you think you'd consider selling it, or would you just stay put? It's the same skill. You're just applying it in another kind of way, right? With a different exact
way. I would propose that the first time you ask it after you get pushback, that you don't give them a number.
Yeah.
That the second time you give them the number, but that the first time you say the gauging expectations, say, look, I'm asking more or less to kind of gauge expectations, see where we're at. Obviously, like, I would never want to waste your time in any way, shape, or form. With that being said, is there a certain price range that you're looking for? Yeah. And then leaving it open. And
I don't need pushback. Yeah. So maybe like, I don't need a pinpoint to the penny, but did you have like a range as to what you were considering?
Exactly.
And then if they still push back, then
throw in a number.
Yeah. Basically. And then what I'm aware of too, and this is where you're at, and it's super cool, bro, because we've known each other a long time since you were like a little kid, you know? And I've watched you.
You know what's funny?
Yeah.
Before you complete that, my wife showed me a picture, because now I'm mentoring Jaime, which is my brother-in-law.
Yeah.
Dude, she showed me a picture. Dude, he was like a 12-year-old.
I know. Looks like a little kid.
It was like literally like a little kid, bro.
Yeah. And that's how when I first met you, that's how you were, bro.
Yeah.
So, but I've watched you mature into just a rock star salesperson. And in terms of like skill set. And so what I'm about to say to you, I know that you know is accurate, is that as you go down the path of mastery, you make a decision to go pro. Mm-hmm. Not just like, you know, this is cool. This is like a profession that I'm involved in. No, I'm going to be a professional. I'm going to go pro. And I'm going to master these different conversations. What ends up happening is, because these skills are transferable, then you reach you unlock this next level, kind of like a video game. So let's say you're talking to a just list that just sold, and they happen to be, oh yeah, like the reason that we're considering selling is my grandma passed away. Now I can click into probate because I know it. I know I've mastered that presentation. Yeah. Or let's say they're like, yeah, we're considering a cash offer. Bang, you can click into that presentation. Or it's a FSBO who wasn't expired.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? They're all
connected. And if you take the time to go pro, which takes time, bro, like I just did a podcast with a guy who got into, he purchased the archive, which is what we provide people who partner with us. And if they're not partnering with us, they can just buy it. And it includes group coaching. It includes online courses, the probate course I have. Bro, that guy's taken like 15 probate listings in 13 months. He's almost a listing a month, and he's made an extra 100. He told me it's 50% of his business now, that if he didn't have that business, he would have broke even last year because of changes in the market.
Yeah.
What's interesting in his journey, it took him 7 years to dial it in, like to click together all of these different pieces. So for those of you that are listening, like, it's a worthy pursuit, I promise, but make the decision to go pro. Make the decision to master these conversations, because once you do, I can tell you, Jose's having a lot of fun right now. Not only is it fun, he's making a lot of money, right? So, I encourage you to do likewise. So if you're in Oxnard, go check him out. He's the real deal. We appreciate you guys chiming in and plugging in. We're 100% committed to teaching tactics, not just mindset. We will teach you some mindset stuff, but most people teach mindset because they can't teach tactics. We will give you tangible, tactical things that you can go into the marketplace and make money with right now. The best way to show somebody you can help them is to help them for free, and that's what we're doing. So appreciate you guys. Be great.
Later.